Hey everybody, welcome back to Language of the Bible. I'm Harry and today we're beginning a new series. Today we're beginning a study on the Gospel of Mark. And today's video will serve as an introduction for this study. Now, for starters, let's talk about who wrote this gospel. Tradition has it that this gospel was written by Mark. That is John Mark, the same John Mark mentioned in the book of Acts, the same John Mark mentioned by Paul in his epistles. He was a companion of Paul and Barnabas later on. He was a follower and companion of the apostle Peter as well. And tradition has it that Mark's gospel was a first-hand eyewitness gospel, primarily from Peter himself. So basically, the details of the narration that Mark would supply in his gospel came over from the apostle Paul or the apostle Peter himself. This is why Mark's gospel has some very unique details. Although the gospel of Mark is much shorter than any of the other gospels, in particular the synoptic gospels that share lots of overlapping narratives between each other. Although it is much shorter than Luke and Matthew and Luke have much more unique material overall, when it comes to the narratives that these three gospels share, Mark, Matthew, and Luke, Mark has details to these narratives that Matthew and Luke are missing. And it's very possible that, again, this is due to the first-hand eyewitness source behind this gospel, which was probably the apostle Peter. Now, Mark is much more simplistic in his style. His Greek is inferior compared to Matthew and definitely compared to the Gentile Greek-speaking Luke. Mark's gospel's Greek it pales in comparison to these other two works in the New Testament. It probably has the worst Greek in the entire New Testament. Now, the Gospel of Mark also can be pretty repetitive with words like immediately, simple conjunctions like the word and used over and over again, basically copying and mimicking Old Testament narrative style with the continuous mention of the Hebrew conjunction vav or wa. We continuously get and it so happened, and so happened, and so happened, and we get that over and over again in the Gospel of Mark as well. Now, who was Mark written for? Now, there are two primary theories or hypotheses as far as the audience, the target audience of Mark. Some Bible scholars tend to favor Syria, where Antioch is located, as a location where Mark could have had his target audience for. But the dominant position within scholarship is that the Gospel of Mark was written to the Christians in the city of Rome. And this fits, it makes lots of sense for multiple reasons. First of all, Peter, we knew, established a presence and a ministry in Rome, as tradition has it. And again, if Mark's gospel is written by John Mark, who was a companion of Peter, it makes sense for him to have written to Rome, in particular during the time of Nero, Emperor Nero's persecution of Rome, the persecution of the Christians in Rome, where the Apostle Paul and the Apostle Peter would have been beheaded, which would have discouraged greatly this Christian community in Rome, not to mention the persecutions that they are enduring as well at the hands of Nero and the government. So it would have made sense for Mark, the follower or companion of Peter, former follower of Paul, to rise to the occasion in the midst of this situation, in the midst of this great tribulation that the Roman Christians are going through, for him to write something to bring them comfort, in particular, writing the gospel of Jesus Christ and bringing them comfort, showing them how Jesus endured tribulations and how his followers and his disciples were to endure tribulations and persecution as well because of their following him. The servant is not greater than the master. So we see all these concepts in the gospel. So this would put the Gospel of Mark written probably sometime between the years 65 to 70 AD, sometime before the destruction of the temple, but sometime after Nero's persecution of Roman Christians. So this would make Mark the oldest of all the gospel writers. So when you take into consideration your studies of the Gospels, always take into consideration that Mark probably has the oldest gospel and in many respects probably the most basic fundamental gospel. Now, as far as the overall structure of the book, while authors might differ as to how they divide the different sections of Mark, there is a consensus that the center of the book, the climax of the book, is found in chapter 8, verse 29, in Peter's confession that Jesus is the Messiah and the Son of God. So this is basically the center, the fulcrum of this entire gospel narrative. And right here, it highlights the confession of Peter as the most crucial element of the entire book. As you will see, as we study throughout the Gospel of Mark, you're going to see that there is confusion among the disciples, confusion among the followers of Jesus as to his identity, as to his person. Who is this man? They will ask that question repeatedly throughout the gospel, and they will be at a loss of words as to who this man is. There is no grasp of his messiahhood. There is no grasp of his sonship. None of these things are understood. But finally, when we get to Mark chapter 8, verse 29, we see the first sign, the first hint of the followers of Jesus starting to get it. Even so, after that, there's lots of ambiguity as to the person of Jesus, as to the understanding of the disciples of who he is. And it won't be till after the resurrection when the apostles will truly understand the nature of Jesus' personhood and the nature of his mission and his purpose. But till then, we're kind of left in the dark. A very important characteristic of Mark is this concept of a secret Messiah. Basically, Jesus is telling people, whether it be demon-possessed individuals, whether it be people that he cures miraculously, he's telling them to stay quiet, to don't tell anybody about what transpired, because he's keeping his identity under wraps. He's keeping it on the hush, so no one will know who he is, not trying to bring any undue attention to his person, to his mission, not trying to bring an early end, a premature end to his actual purpose and mission, which ends at the cross. But he has to get there. He can't allow anything else to get in the way, which is one of the reasons why this messianic secret develops to begin with. But again, we have hints of his personhood throughout this, the entire gospel. And finally, we have it at the very center in Peter's confession: you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And again, we will see it repeated later on in Jesus' trial. We'll see it later on again by the Roman soldier at Jesus' crucifixion. And again, after the resurrection, it's finally made known. It's finally palpable and understandable and intelligible to all of Jesus' disciples, all of his followers going forward. And we, the readers of Mark, get to benefit from that knowledge, starting from the very beginning of the gospel and reading throughout the gospel, already knowing these things that those who lived through it did not know in real time until it was culminated in the crucifixion and in the resurrection of Jesus. And that's it for today's video. We talked about the Gospel of Mark, its author, who it was written for, the target audience. We talked a little bit about Mark and his style, his inferior Greek, his repetition in narrative, very similar to the Old Testament style. And we talked about the structure of the book, in particular, its center and fulcrum, its most important point, which is Jesus as the Messiah, as the Son of God, which is a secret hidden to Jesus' followers during the time of his ministry, hidden from his opponents, again, during the time of his ministry, but revealed at the cross and at the resurrection. That's it for today's video. Please comment down below if you have any questions, any concerns, any disagreements, or any prayer requests. We're here to listen. Take care and God bless. Bye-bye.